This time on Poll Hub, the new abortion law in Texas has returned the issue of abortion once again to the center of the national political stage. The last week's been filled with a lot of political and legal analysis of the law, but we're stepping back to look at what decades of polling say about how Americans think about this issue. Then there's a big election coming up in California. Voters there will decide first whether to toss Governor Gavin Newsom out of office, and second, if that happened, which of the 46 candidates would replace him for the rest of his term. It's all a little nutty, but we were interested in the polling aspect of this. Why is this state so hard to survey, and why in this election does it make it even worse? And that's not all. Now it's for Lee. For Lee's fun fact, we're looking at tattoos. Lots to talk about, so let's get to it. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho.
And I'm Lee Marigoff.
The debate about abortion rights really intensified this week with the Texas law prohibiting abortions after 6 weeks and allowing, the second half of that is allowing enforcement not by a government entity, but really by any private citizen who can sue abortion providers or anyone else for that matter that aids a woman in getting an abortion. It's certainly brought the issue front and center in our national debate. What's been the public reaction?
I think it's not unexpected. I think that this has been a wake-up call, probably more to Democrats than Republicans, because there is a sort of like, with Biden as president, it's sort of like that battle was won. Now the battle has been rejoined. And I think that, given that the public as a whole does not want to end Roe v. Wade, this kind of flies in the face of public opinion. A lot more I could say about that, but I think for the purpose of where we are right now, this is an issue that has been met with the kind of reaction that you probably would have expected on both sides.
Yeah, we've done a lot of polling over the last decade or so, Jay. Go ahead.
Yeah, all I was going to say is that we often reduce this to a pro-life or pro-choice. I mean, that's the conversation is often reduced to that. And so in 2019, we asked that question and 57% said they were pro-choice, 35% said pro-life, 8% said unsure. Well, you'd think, okay, well done. I mean, that's a pretty big margin saying you're pro-choice. So this law and what it does must be wildly unpopular with Americans. But there's so much more to it than that, because in that same poll, we did a lot more. We asked a lot more questions, and we went a lot deeper into what Americans are thinking.
Yeah, and I think that what we've tracked this issue over the last decade. We've done it with a couple of our partners, one with NPR and the PBS NewsHour, where we have gone beyond just asking either the binary question of whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, or whether you feel that abortion, another standard question is whether people feel that it should be legal at any time, in all circumstances, only in certain circumstances, or illegal. And so we have also taken one step further, not only with those national partners, but also with the Knights of Columbus, in tracking attitudes over time, and found that opinion is certainly much more nuanced than what those labels actually suggest. And it depends upon, very often, the debate that's occurring in the national court, to not necessarily the Supreme Court, although that too, but the National Court of Public Opinion, and the debate that is occurring there, whether people identify with one side or the other. What are some of the things that we have looked at and ways of measuring people's opinions on abortion that have suggested that it may not be so black and white?
Well, I think first of all, we put it into a multitude of choices. At one extreme, abortion should be available at any time, during a pregnancy. And at the other extreme, the sixth option was abortion should never be permitted under any circumstances. And when you do it that way, and you sort of take the pro-life and pro-choice positions and actually provide specific options, then you see there's no one single option. The most gets 29%, which
A plurality,
is
yeah.
a plurality, but not even a strong one at that. And that one is that abortion should be allowed only in cases of rape, incest, or to save the life of the woman. I think and then the others get, more or less. The notion that abortion should never be permitted under any circumstances is the lowest one of those at 9%. And I think some of the reaction to the Texas court is it gets about as close to that with the 6-week limit as more to the extreme than either to the middle, and certainly not to the pro-choice position. So I think that's why we're seeing the reaction. From a polling perspective, I think it's very important to underscore what both of you have been saying, that if you just use the pro-choice, pro-life label, you're going to get a lot of people in that bucket who are being kind of like into one of the positions when in fact they have lots of other variations about when and under what circumstances it could be. I think in this case in Texas, because the rape and incest part is not part of what is being considered offensive to the issue. That's why it's getting
It's not in the Texas law is an exception for rape and incest. I remember in 2019 when we did this poll and we talked about it on this podcast, 44% of people identifying as pro-life said it should be allowed in the case of rape, incest, or to save the life of the woman. So that's nearly half, not quite, but nearly half of those identifying as pro-life believe that. And I think that's why the Texas law is being seen as so extreme by a lot of folks, including those who are, self-identify as pro-life.
And then I think we have to also look at the Supreme Court in all this, recognizing that 3 of the justices were picked by Donald Trump in his 4 years as president. Barack Obama, I believe, only had 1 with an asterisk in the 8 years. So the court is very much unbalanced in favor of letting this Texas law go through, or at least not stopping it.
Well, I think what we've also seen as we've polled this over the decade is that it isn't just an issue that Americans do identify with the extreme, but I think also that there are quite a large proportion of Americans who also see that there should be some or significant restrictions on the legality of abortion. So a lot more to discuss going forward. And this issue is certainly not going to go away anytime soon.
So somebody who may be going away sometime soon, but it's highly unlikely, if you believe the polls, is California Governor Gavin Newsom. California, as you may recall, had a successful recall election, successful if you wanted to recall the governor, when Governor Gray Davis was removed. And this guy, what's his name, Schwarzenegger became the governor as a result of that. One of the big famous electoral recalls in American history. So they're back at it again in California, hoping to remove some people hoping to remove Gavin Newsom. Our interest in this is that California, as we know, is kind of notoriously difficult to poll. And so I really want you to explain why this is hard to poll, but why in this case is it so hard? We have a group of polls that show any place from a 6 to a 16 point in the most recent poll lead to keep him. In other words, to not recall him. But everybody who comments on this says, but who knows? How do you get to who knows from a 6 to 16 point lead when you're polling California?
Special election. I think what usually draws people to the polls is a focus of national elections very often. People do not tend to participate as often or as much in local elections. Now, this is certainly a statewide election, but there's a big, big question mark as to who is actually going to be motivated to vote and who is actually going to show up at the polls. California, you're right, even in its, even on a good day, is a very diverse state. There are a lot of language differences across the state. When you poll California, you need to have a lot of opportunity for people who may be able to vote, but are not necessarily fluent in English. So on a good day, in a quiet, boring election, California is not the easiest place to poll.
Well, I think also there's, to add an element of confusion to this, this is a double meaning here, in that on the one hand, you have to vote whether you want to recall the incumbent governor. And then if that's the case, well, where do you want, who do you want to replace him with? So this is not a head-to-head match. In the polls, Larry Elder, who is a Republican and quite conservative and outspoken, actually is leading the replacement part of that. But if you match him up against Governor Newsom, he trails by over 20 points. So, it's sort of the devil you know is better than one you don't. In this case, Newsom is fairly popular and may withstand this challenge, perhaps aided by the fact that the replacement seems less popular than the governor, who's sort of, in some political trouble. The numbers have shifted, Jay, and I think that's important to point out. A month or two ago, there was a greater sense that he should be recalled, the governor. That has shifted in almost all the polls, in part because moderate Democrats, weak Democrats, sort of have gotten their partisan back up in the air the more this has become a national issue. And I do think also that the issue in Texas is maybe casting a shadow on what's going on in California, because, things political have kind of gotten into the middle of this recall, and it's changed the dialogue a little bit.
But Barb, before we move on, I just want to kind of reiterate, I mean, do you have a lot of faith in these polls, knowing what we know about California in a runoff election and who's going to show up and all that?
Well, I think it gives us certainly a best guess. I mean, the one thing that I do like about polling, regardless of the noise that it can make during an election, is it does provide some boundaries, at least for the pundits and the politicians, to just spin their own case. It keeps them within those boundaries. I don't know if it's still going to be Governor Newsom. At this point, it looks that way.
And also, by 2-1, the people who've already voted, we know, are registered Democrats. And interestingly, 80% of the people who had voted at this point in the presidential election have also voted in the special. So it's getting some attention for sure in California. It's an interesting thing, and maybe another point we can discuss. Is recall a good thing, or do things work out if you're unpopular, like in New York recently?
Well, California has always wanted
story
to bring things to the ballot box. So that is their tradition, whether it's referendums or whether it's recalls. That's their signature democracy. So I think we're probably in for a lot more of that in the future. Let's hope not 46 names, though, on the ballot.
And how could you possibly poll?
Well,
you have another 20 minutes while I read you the list of names. I would say one thing on that before we go to the fun fact, and I think this might even be a preliminary fun fact. Am I allowed to? This one is, you mentioned Schwarzenegger.
You're the boss. You can do what you want.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned Schwarzenegger as kind of like...
You didn't wait for an answer either.
That's why he's the boss, right? The boss doesn't wait for an answer. Can I do this? Yes, I can.
Okay, moving forward then. You mentioned Schwarzenegger is kind of like this known entity who benefited last time. There is a known entity on the ballot this time, Caitlin Jennings, and Jenner. I'm sorry. Well, and that's currently getting 1% in the polls. So this doesn't look like any groundswell support. That has nothing to do with the tattoo issue, however, but I thought it was the tattoo issue, which you referred to as tats, which I must say has already taught me something I was unaware of. In any case, tattoo issues. Well, what do we know about that in Ipsos poll?
Just the fact that you're calling it a tattoo issue,
yeah.
I think suggests this is not in your wheelhouse.
Well, I would say that there are, we have several students who work with us on this project in a variety of production ways and editing and research. And they are on the Zoom and they all just went into hiding as I went that way. So I think I definitely stepped in it.
So what's the fun fact? What did they uncover in this research?
What is the fun fact? Well, Ipsos did a poll in 2019. Funny you should ask. 30% of Americans have what you call tats, Jay, and that's up from 21% in 2012. But the fun fact is a majority of Americans think they make people less attractive. So there's a group out there, and you've seen them around. These aren't just little tattoos. I mean, people are covering, feet worth. I've seen full arms, legs, and God knows what else.
So this was a CBS News poll that we're looking at from 2014. 56% said tattoos make people look, in general, make people look less attractive. 22% more attractive. 14% said depends, which is, that's my answer to everything, right? And 8% said that they didn't have it.
Yeah, well, here you go, though.
Oh, wait a second. What do you guys think?
Well, I think it's ridiculous. People are worried about the long-term impact.
Okay, Grandpa.
People are worried about the long-term impact of a vaccine. I look at these people who are covered in ink, I assume it's ink, and look at what the long-term impact of that is. However, I do want to also ask the question.
Yeah, that does seem to not connect, does it?
Yeah, I want to ask the question, though, and I think I know the answer to this. If you want to, there's 6 people I'm looking at right now, including 3 of us. I'm sure that among the 3 of us, no, I'm not sure. I know I am a 0 on this.
You're a less attractive. So you think less attractive?
I think it's less, and I wouldn't dream of doing this.
Okay, and I think it depends. Barb, what do you think?
I think they can be very attractive.
So it depends, right?
Well, I think I think most times when I see a tattoo, I think it's a kind of a conversation starter, because if there are a lot of them, it usually has a lot. It has meaning for the person who did them. Sometimes, they're, a memory of, something that's happened to them or a person that's very close to them. And so there's always a story or a narrative. So I think in that sense, they're attractive.
More attractive. Okay, Casey.
I always, before you go to Casey, I'm back in here. I always ask 2 questions. Did it hurt? And can you take them away? Which I don't think in either case is a positive.
No, but I think I really I think it's a interesting way of expressing oneself and also doing that in a very open and public way.
Casey, what do you think?
Regarding less attractive or more attractive?
Yep. Yeah. That's where we've drifted away, but that's what we're asking. Yeah.
I was wondering if it was, do you have a tattoo?
No, we won't get that personal.
I think it depends. I think it also, if you ever watch the tattoo fails, I think a tattoo itself could be the determining factor.
So it depends. Yeah, that's fair. Emily, what do you think? Is it more attractive, less attractive? Depends. Don't know.
I agree with Barbara. I think it's really a form of expression, and I don't think I would care if somebody had them. It depends on the tattoo. I agree with everybody else. If you're covered head to toe, maybe not, but it really depends on the person, not really just the tattoo.
Ashley, what do you think? You found this, right? This was your fun fact, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I think it's a really beautiful form of art and expression. And a lot of times there's a reason for getting it, even if it's just that it really like resonates with them. So I find that really interesting. I'll have to say, like, it does depend, but I really do. I find tattoos really pretty because a lot of times it's either just some nice artwork or it's a story behind it. So it's always something interesting.
Okay, and Marcello, we're saving you for last because answer the question, but then Marcello, I discovered yesterday, actually knows something about tattoos that probably none of us do because of his studies here at Marist, or actually, he was at Marist, but not here at Marist.
Can I make a request that next week the fun fact is not tongue piercing?
Sure, you can make that request. Ashley's a producer, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, Marcello, first, less attractive, more attractive pens, and then what is it about tattoos that you know that we don't?
Well, I absolutely love tattoos, completely more attractive. So I'm in the minority there. And something that you may not have known about tattoos is about tribal, with air quotes, tattoos, which are actually the Pacific tattoo. And a lot of modern tribal pieces actually consist of a conglomeration of a lot of Pacific Island nations symbolism and designs and patterns. And that's because around the World War II era and a little bit before that, a lot of those island nations suffered from missionaries and imperialism. However, Samoa was one of those special islands because it had two huge islands, and so which is today American Samoa and then Samoa. They were actually able to keep their traditional methodology of the tatau and all their cultural ties to that. And so they were actually not responsible, but a lot of historians do believe that they are technically responsible for the revival, the Pacific revival of the traditional tatau. And so, for example, just a brief example from that, Tahiti actually completely lost their all of their ties to that tradition, and so they actually brought over Samoan tafunga tatau, which is tattoo masters, to reteach the traditional methods of tattoo with the 2 sticks and the tapping of the combs. And so it's really interesting stuff.
So he found this out, and I found this out because I didn't know this about him, where you did a kind of a study abroad thing, right?
Yes, I studied with the School for International Training in the Pacific, so mostly in Samoa and Fiji and Hawaii as well.
And so your final project was going to be done as the pandemic started, and you were cut short of that.
Yes, so I was out there for 2 months, and then the last doing research and taking classes, and the last month was supposed to be actually filming. I was going to do a short documentary on Samoan tatau, and that's exactly when we got pulled because of the COVID. And
so here's one other thing you don't know. Our podcast will be edited from Hawaii starting in a couple of weeks because, Marcello, you're going back to Hawaii.
Yes, I'm moving there in October to try and continue this work a little bit.
So there you go. See, surprise for everybody.
Wow.
How awesome.
Wow. And I would say that is the best reason I've heard yet to consider doing this. That's really fascinating.
A tattoo or studying abroad?
Both.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Poll Hub. Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. I'm Mary Griffith, and Poll Hub's executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor. Ashley Marcinek is our production assistant, and Marcello Bettman is our trusted editor. Thanks to the Roper Center Archive at Cornell University. They provide us with the ability to look back at survey questions and results over the decades. If you have questions or comments, reach out to us on social media. We're at Marist Poll on Twitter and Marist Poll on Facebook and Instagram. And while you're at it, check out our free series of short online learning modules. The Marist Poll Academy can be found on maristpoll.com. Finally, if you like what you hear on Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review on your podcasting app of choice. Positive reviews help others find us. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you back here next week.